but we only needed, okay, we only need a few. So if some of them broke, obviously we won't use those. But if a few of them made it, we really only need like 4, really. And if there's only like a couple that made it, then we'll use those. And then I'll teach you how to do, like, I didn't do these with the stick-ons. I actually made these with the icing. So we can also do that. Okay, so happy birthday, Damara. I don't know if I'm saying your name right. I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. My name is Jackie, and my company is Jackie Sweet Shapes. Cookie classes are with the company Jackie Sweet Schoolhouse, but I own them both, and they're just 2 separate companies, but they're both mine. So I'm going to set you up for success, and I'm going to, since you all are brand new, let me actually start recording here for the other folks. Okay, so this is a really good beginner class. If this is your first time. So we're going to have the first 10 minutes. I'm going to just kind of set you up for success, and I'm going to show you how to hold the icing bags, how to pipe, which is the outline. Yes, I can see your chats, Donna. So I'm going to show you how to use the icing bag, how to do the outlining, which is the hardest part. We're going to work on the worksheet. I'm going to give you tips, tons of tips, and then it'll take about 2 hours or so, maybe a little bit less since this is a beginner class. But to decorate all of our, 8 cookies. I have 2 that aren't up here. So that'll be it, and then hopefully you'll have a lot of skills. If you want to take another class later on that's a little harder, then you can do that. Or if you want to go into this yourself, kind of dabble in some cookie decorating, that would be fun too. All right, so let's get started. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be looking up a little bit as we go. Okay, so first thing I want you to do is make sure that you have your parchment paper out. I think we just lost somebody, maybe Donna, but I'll just try to keep going here. Damara, you could fill her in. Okay, so we have our parchment sheet out. You want to take everything out of your cookie kit and put it in front of you. We're going to have our cookies out. We need our toothpicks. If you haven't already, grab a pair of scissors. We're going to need those. And then if you haven't already, also make sure to do the massaging of each bag. So mostly the ones that don't have a Sharpie line on it. So you're going to see some that have Sharpie lines, and I'll explain that in a minute. But the ones that don't, you're just going to want to kind of knead it like this a little bit. And it's just really common that out of like a few days of unuse, they kind of separate the icing and the water and the colors. So you're just going to want to kind of mix it all in, like all the thin ones that don't have a Sharpie line. You're going to want to mix it in for about 30 seconds or so. Okay, so take some time to do that, and then while you're doing that, I'm going to explain sort of the consistencies a little bit. So y'all go ahead and just kind of massage each bag. So the icings, there's 8 bags, but there's 4 colors. So 2 of them are the same color, but they each have, one has a line on it and one does not. So the one that has a line on it is the thicker icing. The one that does not have a line is thinner. It's just been watered down a little bit. And then that's going to be the one that is what we call flooding. And flooding is just you put that thin icing inside of the thick one. The thick one acts like a barrier, like a little wall. And you put the thin one inside, which is called flooding. So you have the thick and the thin. And then the thick ones for the classes, I always make them a little bit thinner. Like when I'm decorating, you know, this is my full-time job. So when I'm doing this on my own, I make it a little bit thicker. But for y'all, especially being beginners, I made it a little bit thinner. So you're going to see that it's not super hard to squeeze it out. It might be a little bit more runny than like super thick, but that's just because I don't want y'all to get a hand cramp or complain about not being able to get that icing out. So what I want you to do after you mix them all up, all of the ones that have a line on them, you're going to take those and you're going to put them to the right or the left, like separate. And we're just going to make sure that we keep these ones separate than the thin ones so that we know these ones are the thick ones, the other ones are the thin. So all the ones that have a line, you're going to put those to the right or the left, whatever you prefer. And then all the other ones are going to go to the other side. That's just so that you know, and I'll say it as we go, but I'll say, okay, grab the thick one, the one that has a line on it. Then you kind of look at it. But if you have them separated, that sometimes helps. So you should have 4 shades, you know, light, tan, like a darker brown, and then a dark brown. And so this class is supporting NCAA. Wait, did I say that right? I'm like getting nervous now. I'm like, did I say that right? NAACP. Whenever I teach a class, I always like forget. My brain just, it's crazy. And so this is going, 25% is going to the organization at the end of this month. I've been doing this for about, I guess it's been about a month and a half. I've been doing Black Lives Matter. So y'all, that's super special that you signed up for this class, because it means that you care about this as well as I do, and want change in our world, which is really important and just a necessary cause. And so I'm kind of doing my part to help out. I know that it's a small part, but at least, you know, I can use my business to help bring that change and that awareness. So I'm really grateful for y'all for signing up for this particular class. Okay, so let's see. Yes, thank you, Damara. I just saw your comment. Okay, so the other thing I'm going to say is you can feel free to do anything different than what I do. Like if you want to change up the colors, like I know, for instance, I've got these two is dark brown and then the lighter brown, but if you want to change up the colors, feel free to do that. I always tell people, use your artistic flair if you have it and you want to kind of go a separate route, that's totally fine. I am going to teach you how to do these little hearts. There's a technique called the wet on wet technique. And that's basically when you add in the background color while it's still wet, then you add in the hearts. They're a little bit tricky. They look easy, but they're a little tricky. That wet on wet technique is, it's not like hard, but it just takes some getting used to. So I'll teach you how to do that. Those hearts are going to be on all of them. And then again, hopefully we have enough of these little stick-ons that we're just going to pop those on, and that'll be easier than trying to freehand it. But I'm also going to show you how to freehand it. Okay, so first thing, now that we have all of the fundamentals out of the way, I'm going to teach you how to cut your icing bag, how to use it, like hold it, and then I'm also going to show you how to do our worksheet, which is just going to help us feel a little bit more comfortable with doing it on the cookies, because it is the hardest part, is the outlining and the detailing. So the first thing we'll do is we'll grab our darkest brown, and we're going to do the one that has a line in it. So just remember, the line is the thick one, and that's the one that you do for outlining and detailing. Okay, so before I cut it, I'm going to show you how to hold it, and then you can do this with me. All right, so there's a knot at the top just so that the icing doesn't spill out, but we're going to be holding it under the knot. So there's sometimes usually like a little separation. So we just kind of push that icing down a little bit, and when we cut it, it'll come down more. See, there's a little bit of air here. So it's going to go into our hand. The easiest way I can show that is you're under the knot. You put it into your palm like this. And then you take your thumb and you're going to just kind of right on the top, like you're pressing your thumb into your palm. I like to tuck my thumb in. That kind of gives a little extra squeeze, because really you're squeezing your thumb into your palm. And you're squeezing from the top down. So I don't really want to see you here, because all that icing is above your thumb. I want to see you all the way above all that icing, so you get a good squeeze. And you're going to have that thumb resting there. Tuck your thumb in like this. and then just fold your fingers over like so. I didn't paint my nails. I usually paint my nails. So just excuse my bare fingernails. So you're gonna go like this, and then you turn your wrists so that you're upright. So this is flat. Turn your wrist here so that you're directly, your bag, your icing bag, the tip of it is gonna be completely directly over, like that. Okay, so again, stick it into your palm, thumb kind of folds over, tuck your thumb in, just fold your hands, your fingers over. Then you're gonna take your pointer finger on your opposite hand, whichever one doesn't have the icing bag, usually the non-dominant hand here, and then you can put it on the base of your icing bag here. That kind of helps steady your hand if you're really shaky. Then here, a lot of times, you know, older ladies, or, you know, ones who maybe are a little nervous, it just helps to have that steadiness right there. You can also press against your wrist. That also helps to kind of steady. You're gonna see me in this class, I'm not always here because I don't want it to be blocking your view, so sometimes I put my finger on my wrist and that just kind of steadies you a little bit. Okay, so now let's cut the icing bag. And I've got two ways to show you how to do this, because cutting it is very important, because if you cut too big of a hole, you won't really be able to get those details like we want. But if you cut too small, then you're not going to be able to have that wall around the edge of your cookie. So I'm going to show you exactly two ways that you can kind of visualize this and do it. And the first is with a number 2 pencil. So you might not have one of these lying around. I don't really know how I have one of these lying around because I never use it other than this. But I want just to kind of show you visually here. You see the lead, right? And you see where the lead meets the wood? That width right there is about the width that we want to cut our icing bag. So if you can visualize that, if you're a visual person, you kind of know what a number 2 pencil lead looks like. When you cut this little triangle off, and I'm not going to do it now because I want to show you the other way too, but when you cut this little triangle off, the little triangle piece that comes off after you cut it is going to kind of look like a number 2 pencil lead that comes off. That width of that lead is going to be the width of that hole. Okay, the second way is you can line up your icing bag on your worksheet, and you're going to have the tip, like really the utmost part of that tip lined up on one of the lines. And then what you would do is you would cut half of the one line to the second line, half of that distance. So let me get my toothpick here. So you wouldn't cut, here, you're going to cut about half right here off. Okay, and then there's a trick if you cut off too little. If that's too small, I'm going to show you, but you have to cut it first, and then we'll do the worksheet and I can show you if you need to cut more. So if this is better for you, you're going to line it up. You're going to see about halfway between those two lines, and we're going to cut. So let's cut that little piece off. And then it's kind of a flat line right here, so I like to just run my fingers against that seam and make sure that when I look at it, it looks like a hole. Okay, and then hold it just like I taught you, and we're going to do the lines first. I'm going to give you tips as we go. So hold it like I taught you, and then we're going to practice. So we start at the line. You touch the piece of paper when you start and when you stop. But that's the only time. So you touch it to let it catch, you lift your hand up, and then you let it drag, and then touch down to stop. The key, the most important thing when you're doing this is letting that icing drag. So you're gonna literally pull your wrist up. Your wrist with the icing bag is not going to be touching the table. So it's a little bit weird because your elbow is on the table, but your wrist is up, like about maybe 3 inches or so. And then that allows you to just let that icing just kind of drag on. And so your tip is never touching the paper or the cookie unless you're starting and stopping the line. I hope that makes sense. It's just going to take a little bit of practice, and I'm going to kind of keep reminding you. And so we'll do the line. We're going to do the whole worksheet, but I'm going to keep on giving you some tips as we go. But again, the most important is making sure your wrist is up off the table, and you're just letting that icing drag out as you're squeezing, you know, your thumb into your palm. And I told you I would tell you if you know that you cut the right amount. This dark brown icing should completely cover the black ink on the paper. So if you can see the black ink, even just a little, like if it looks like there's barely no dark brown icing line, you're going to want to take your scissors and cut just a little bit more off. And you know, you can keep cutting more, just a little bit at a time, and then keep on seeing, you know, is this line the same width as the line on your paper? And if it's like a little bit bigger, that's totally fine. Sometimes for beginners, it's better to have a little bit bigger than smaller. But if you're just like a giant blob of icing, then you cut too much. And that's why I gave you extra bags. You know, you got 2 extra bags. If you end up cutting too much off, you can transfer it to the new bag, and I will show you how to do that right after I do these lines. But hopefully you're good and you don't have to do that, because it is a bit of a hassle, but I will show it just in case in any of, like during the class, if any of the bags you cut off too much, I'll show you how to do that. So wherever you're at, just kind of pause for a moment and watch as I show you how to correct if you cut too much off. And this applies to any of the ones you just have 2 extra bags, so just 2 second chances. But what you're going to want to do is cut a big hole, because we're going to squeeze this one out into the new bag. So I'm going to switch frames here. So you have this bag is the new one, and then this is the old one. So I'm going to stick this inside this new bag. And I've got one hand holding the top of the old one, and I'm going to take my other hand and I'm going to squeeze this out into the new bag. And so as I squeeze, I'm going to pull it out with this hand. So squeeze it all out. And then I'm going to take this one, discard it, tie a knot on this one. And then you can cut the top if this is too much. But that is how you have a fresh new bag, and then you can cut it. But just make sure, since this is your second chance, you cut it smaller than what you did before. So hopefully that helps in case you end up, you know, making any mistakes. And then we'll just want to follow along with the worksheet. All right, y'all are probably way ahead of me now. But as we do this, just want to, you know, make sure you're holding it the right way. Make sure you're squeezing from the top down. Make sure all that icing is below your thumb so you get a good squeeze. Make sure your wrist is up, letting that icing drag. It is a lot of hand-eye coordination. This is probably the hardest part, so that's why we do the worksheet with it. The circles are the hardest ones. But yeah, we want that brown line to be completely covering the black. Not that you're tracing it perfectly, but that it's the same width pretty much, or a little bit bigger than the lines on the paper. And the circles are hard sometimes you can kind of manipulate it in the air. Like if you feel like it's about to fall in a wrong place, you can sort of like pick it up and sort of move it a little bit. You can also use one of your toothpick skewers to sort of like push it a little bit, or kind of smooth it out. I don't know. This is like the part that you can make the most mistakes, because if I also don't like my outline, and this applies to when you do it on the cookies, you can wipe it off if you want to restart. So there's always that option if you really mess up on your cookie. Right now it's not as important because it's just a worksheet, but if you do it on a cookie, you can always wipe it off and redo it. So this is the best part as far as correcting your mistakes. And again, I'm just going to reiterate that for beginners, it's better to have a little bit of a bigger hole, you know, so maybe a little bit wider than the actual black ink. But again, when you do make it bigger, just take off just a smidge, you know, not too much. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Just make sure that those plastic parts that you're cutting off don't get into your cookies. Yeah, so now it's a little bit bigger, which will give me a bigger barrier for that thin icing inside. Okay, I'm gonna finish my worksheet. I don't know if y'all are ahead of me or not. I'll just finish it up. Yes, the wrist, pulling the wrist up is really helpful. I think some people try to keep their wrist down, but then like pull the like bag up, which is just really difficult. But just keeping that elbow down, of course, and then the hand up. And because the hand is up, that's sort of why you need your other finger on your opposite hand to kind of steady you either at the wrist or at the tip. When I'm doing this, you know, for custom orders, I do have my finger here instead of at my wrist, but I kind of like both. It's fine. Okay, so after we finish the worksheet, we are done with that. We don't need it again. We can put this off to the side, discard it. We are going to start on the little hearts because those are going to be the easiest. And so just like we did here on our worksheet, we're going to take our heart cookie and we're going to outline, you know, the whole heart, and then we're going to flood it. And I'll teach you how to flood it if this is your first time, because there are a few tricks as well for the flooding that are just helpful to know and to kind of see. So we'll do it, you know, the outline, which you've already done. We'll just go ahead and use the darkest brown since it's already cut for that outline, and then we'll flood it and I'll show you all the tips and tricks for that. Okie dokie. So I hope we're ready to move on here. Okay, so for the outline, we're getting as close to the edge as possible without this icing falling off of the edge, of course. You can start wherever. I usually start at the bottom, but it's just the same thing you were just practicing, only it's on a cookie. And we're gonna just go the whole edge here. And you don't have to do it in one fluid motion like I'm doing. If you need to kind of go along and take breaks as needed, you can. And then if you also are not happy with it, you can wipe it off and do it again. But that's what we want first, is just that outline there. And make sure there are no holes or gaps in that outline. Remember, this is your barrier, so if there's any way that that thin icing can leak out, you know, we don't want that. We want to make sure that we're a complete barrier, a wall, so that that thinner icing doesn't escape. And then every time that you do the outline, you kind of wait for, I don't know, like a minute or so, which is why I'm kind of just talking right now, to let it dry. And so you want to let it dry a little bit, and then you can put the thin icing in, because if it's really wet when you put the thin icing in, it'll just kind of like mesh into it, and it won't really be that barrier that you need. Now I'm going to show you how to do the thin icing. So for the thin icing, the bags you cut a little bit bigger of a hole. So like if I take my worksheet again as a visual, like I lined it up, it's kind of going to be the same sort of deal, except this time you're going to cut a hole that's exactly the width between this line and this line. So it's a little bit, it's about double the size. So instead of it being half, it's about a hole, you know, from the width of one line to the next. And the reason for that is if it's too small, it just takes forever to squeeze that thin icing out. Okay, so you're gonna notice, so we're gonna cut, you're gonna notice that this icing is a lot thinner. So if you've never done this before, just take a moment to watch me here. You hold the bag the same way. The only difference is that the icing is thinner, but everything else is the same. So when we go to flood, what I like to do is I like to start on the outside and then spiral in. If you're afraid of it over flooding, that just means it's gonna like literally like go over the barrier, then you're gonna want to get close to the barrier but not touching it, and then you use your toothpick to kind of swirl it and push it to the outline. But then all of the middle is going to be completely filled, because the icing starts to harden after about 2 minutes. And so you have about 2 minutes to get it all in there, to pop any air bubbles with the skewer, to move it to the outline, and then it starts to harden. So you want to do it pretty quickly. This is a very small cookie, so we don't really have that problem as much. But I am going to show you what I do, and then y'all can give it a go. So I go close to the outline. Sometimes I touch it, sometimes I don't. For beginners, I teach just get close to it, and then on the inside, you want to completely flood it, no gaps at all on the inside. Then you're gonna take your toothpick, and I swirl it around, and I push it to the outline. And then you also pop any air bubbles. If there are any, there might not be any. But then once it's in there, it all is gonna settle. It's done. I don't need to mess with it. I'm gonna let it start drying, and it'll start hardening in about 1.5 minutes from now. But sometimes you can give it a little shake or a tap very carefully. You don't want to break your cookie or anything like that, but sometimes that'll help it with the air bubbles and just settling. But it's pretty easy on the heart because the heart's so tiny. And then go ahead and try that out. I'll just give you all about 1 minute or so to do that. This is the fun part. The flooding is the fun part. And what I like to do when I'm done with the icing bag, the thin one, I fold the tip in because I don't want it to leak out everywhere. So I fold this tip in and then I roll it up just a bit so that it's not going to be like leaking out everywhere. And the heart is actually done. This is all that we're doing to it. Just, you know, just a plain old little heart. And so when you finish this, every time we finish a cookie, we're going to move it somewhere safe, to our right or our left on our table, so that it doesn't get messed up, because remember, it's already starting to harden. So if you were to poke it or bump it or whatever, it is going to mess up. And so you just want to very carefully move it to a safe spot so that it can keep drying and be safe. All right. So, yay, you did it. Awesome. The hearts are good practice. We're going to do the other heart for the, you know, the practice. Let's grab, I'm going to let you grab whatever color you want. I am going to do my lightest color here, and I'm going to need my thick one that has a line on it. And so we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to cut the tinier hole in the thick one here. Let it dry for about 30 seconds to a minute. And then we'll cut a hole in our thinner one of the same color and flood it. And so same exact thing. So let's cut that tiny hole in the thick one. Just make sure it's got that Sharpie line on it. And then after you cut it, run your fingers so that it's a hole and not a flat line here. These are tipless bags. They are awesome. I used to work with the Wilton tips, but then I was constantly cleaning them, and I had the non-disposable bags, so I had to clean those, and it was a lot. So now I just do the tipless bags. They're super cheap. When I'm done, I just throw it away, and it's a lot. It saves me a lot with just messiness and time and all that. The only thing is that you do have to cut that tip yourself, but you're cutting the same tip that you would on, like, the same size as the Wilton tip. So like if you kind of know a little bit about tips or the Wilton tips, this would be like a number 2 or a number 3. And if you want to do the tips, you can also purchase those. Just know that it's a number 3 would be like an outline. Okay, so same thing. We get a second try here. And just kind of watching how we're holding it, how we're squeezing it out. And then make sure you don't have any gaps or holes or cracks or anything in your outline. Sometimes I'll go back over it again if I want it to be a little bit thicker, or if maybe there were a lot of holes and stuff. You can also, like, let's say this cookie doesn't have it, but let's say the cookie has a crack, like right on the edge. Like, let's just pretend that it does. Then I take it and I just put like a little dot of icing inside so that it doesn't like seep under. And it probably won't, but if you have a very significant crack, which just happens when I'm like rolling it out, then I'll put a little bit of icing in there so that it doesn't like go under and seep through. Okay, so we let it dry for 30 seconds or a minute. I'm going to take a sip of coffee here. I don't know if y'all know this. If you follow my Instagram, then you would. But I work nights by choice. So since I'm a night owl, and since the quarantine, I just kind of got into this mode where I was like working through the night, and I was super productive at night. And my husband, he was fine with it. So I ended up, like, when he's sleeping, I'm working. So I usually work from like 9 or 10 p.m. until about 8 or 7 a.m. and then I sleep from 8 or 9 a.m. till like whenever, 3 or 4 p.m. and then I wake up, and then I have a few hours with my husband, and then I go back to work. So this coffee is like, this is like morning time for me right now. All right, so we're gonna do our thin one. Remember, you're cutting a little bit bigger of a hole, not too big, so we don't want it to come like spewing out. And then same thing. Sometimes you get little air bubbles, which is fine. It just kind of pops out, so just be careful. And you really want this to be like a little pillow. I think I forgot to say this. It's like a little pillow on top of your cookie. So that meringue powder is what makes it very fluffy. And so I always like to say you want that icing to look like a little pillow on top of the cookie. You shouldn't be able to see the cookie underneath because your icing is thick enough on top. So you shouldn't be able to see that cookie underneath. You want it to be thick enough, just a little pillow on top. And then sometimes like it can be very bumpy, and that's just because people didn't put enough in or their icing is a little too thick. So this is a good thin color, and then we're just making sure we have enough that it's just like a little pillow on top of our cookie. And after that, we are going to move this one aside, make sure that it doesn't get messed up. And I hope I'm not going too fast. I'm trying to kind of go at like a slower beginner speed here. I used to do classes that were 2 hours long, and we did 6 advanced cookies in 2 hours, and I would go so fast because that was the only way we could get it done in 2 hours. And people were yelling at me. This was like probably a year and a half ago when I first started, but people would yell at me, "Oh, you're going too fast." And since then I've slowed down. Now I do not do 6 cookies advanced. That's just way too many. If I do advanced, I'll do like 4 or 3, which takes about 2 hours at like normal pace, not speed of lightning pace. All right. Okay, so let's move on to our L. We'll go L-O-V-E. And they're all going to be the same sort of like process. They're all going to be different colors, and then the only hard part are the hearts. So I'm going to show you what we're going to do. The thing that we're going to need is, of course, our thick dark brown, if you want to do this in the dark brown color. Thick dark brown. It does dry a little bit darker, so this is going to be much darker than what this appears, but a day later, it's kind of like paint coats. When you do a coat of paint, then the next day or whatever, when it dries, it's a little bit darker, like a shade darker, and it's the same thing with the icing. So we're going to do our thick dark brown that has a line on it. So make sure it's got the Sharpie line. Does mine even have the Sharpie line? Oh, I just realized I didn't put a Sharpie line on this. Anyway, so you're going to do the outline here. And then I'll show you the next step, which is going to be a little bit more difficult when we go to add those hearts. But let's just do the easiest part here, or I guess the most simple part that requires the least amount of instructions, but not necessarily easy because you have a lot of turning points here. And anytime you have that, it just makes it hard. So you can stop, at each turn if you need to. Just make sure you're always connecting. So if I stop, I just want to make sure I don't have any hole between that line and this line. And we're going to follow the edge of the cookie. And it might not be perfect. Our cookie might also not be perfect. It might be a little chubby or wonky in some places, but it's totally fine. We're just going to try our best to do the outline here. And y'all can go ahead and get started. You don't have to watch me for the whole thing. And then, of course, just making sure that If there are any cracks, we just add a little dot of icing to it. We make sure that there are no gaps or holes anywhere, and we've got that nice barrier. If there's like a random spot where it like dips down, I sometimes will just go back over that one spot and do another kind of layer of thick icing. Sometimes it happens when I'm rolling it out. These are really hard because there were so many little curves and stuff, so just taking it out of the actual cutter was really hard. So sometimes there might be like a little part that might kind of dip down, and if that's the case, just add like another layer to that part so that when you flood it, it doesn't like over flood. And we'll let it dry. While I'm talking, y'all's will be drying. So what we need for the hearts, and I will show you these, but of course we're going to need, for that wet on wet, we're going to need that thin dark brown that matches the outline. So we'll need that. And then we'll also need, depending on which colors, like I know for sure since I already cut the really light one, I'll grab that. But then, you know, see how these hearts are different colors? I'll also want to get my other colors and just go ahead and cut the hole in those as well. So there's 2 bags that we haven't cut yet, and these are going to be the thin ones. So we'll cut those because when we put our thin icing inside, while it's wet, we're going to take these ones and do those hearts. I'm going to show you how to do those hearts. They're a little bit tricky, but I'll show you and I'll kind of give you tips as I go. So if you want to just wait for me to finish, and then I'll give you all some time to do it as well. But first I want to make sure that these other 2 bags have holes in them as well, just so that they're ready to go as soon as that dark brown icing is in there. All right, and make sure I've got my toothpick, setting myself up for success. I will take my napkin. Where is it? Yeah, these are all going to be the thin ones here. But I am going to wipe it off because I rolled it up and got some icing on it. So I'm going to just kind of clean it up a little bit. So all of these are the thin. You can also do the thick if it's a little too hard, but you won't really know it until you try it. So try doing it with the thin ones first. So watch me here. I'm going to go in just like I've been doing. And then the only difference is going to be adding those hearts. And I have to work, you know, kind of quickly. I don't have to like rush like a mad woman, but I do know that it's going to start drying, and I want to get those hearts in before it starts drying. So I'm kind of going at a beginner pace here, quickly, but not too quickly. And while it's still wet, watch this. What I do with my hearts, I'm gonna pretty much make 2 teardrops. So I squeeze and then I kind of drag down, and then I go on the other side and I squeeze and drag down. And the key for this, it's a little harder than it looks. The key is making sure that the tip never touches the dark brown. So you're letting that icing just kind of fall out. So it's like 2 lines, squeeze and drag down. You're letting that icing kind of fall out, but this tip here never touches the dark brown, because if it does touch the dark brown, what happens is when you pull it back up, the dark brown will kind of come with it, which you can kind of see maybe on this one here. But if they look like a hot mess, you can sort of use your toothpick to maybe drag it down a little bit to make a sharper tip, but just clean it every time after. So like I can kind of manipulate it, but the thin icing is a little tricky. So if this is too hard, like if you do this, you add it with the thin and it's just like a mess or it's like a blob, you can do the same thing with the thick ones for those hearts. It'll be a little bit easier. It just won't like it'll look a little bit more bumpy because the thick one is going inside the thin one, but it is a little bit easier. So try it with the thin, see if you can do that, and if it's a hot mess, you can try to use your toothpick to sort of manipulate it a little bit. And then if you really don't like it, we can scoop out those hearts and try it with the thick ones. All right, so try it out and let me know how it goes for you. The wet on wet is a little harder. If you don't like the hearts, you can also do polka dots. So a couple of options here. Polka dots, again, anytime you're doing the wet on wet, if you do hearts or polka dots, you're just gonna wanna let it fall out and never let that tip touch the color on the cookie. So it's like just that icing falls out, and the icing can obviously touch that other color, but the bag of the tip of the bag never touches it, because then when you pull it up, then it's just gonna like bring up the other color. Let me know how that goes for you. This is where it starts to get messy. Very, very messy. Give y'all a minute to do it. And usually at this point there's a lot of laughing and oh my gosh, you know, again, you can pick that color out with a toothpick if it goes terribly wrong. You can bypass them completely if you don't want to do it. There are options. You can also wait till the darker brown is dry to then add the hearts, which would not be the wet on wet, but it'd be the same process as far as putting them on, and then it would just be like raised hearts rather than like inside the icing. So once you do this L and you like it or you don't like it, then you can make a decision for the other 3 letters what you want to do. But if it worked out for you, awesome, that's great. And cool. All right, good job, ladies. Okay, so we're gonna let this dry. We actually, you know what, we can put the little what is it, Fissenol on it. So it's still a little bit wet, so what we can do, and I put a peace sign, it doesn't matter which one you put on here, but we can take a fist, or I think I might put a fist here, but we can just literally just drop it on very carefully. And since it's still a little bit wet, it'll catch. And maybe move it with our toothpick. Press it in a little bit. So yeah, maybe that's what we'll do. While it's still wet, we'll just pop on that little transfer. And the cool thing is, this cookie is done. It just needs to dry. So you can give yourself a little pat on the back and say, yay, I did it. You know, we have the hearts done, so that's 2. And then this is a 3rd cookie that's completely finished and just needs to dry. It actually looks better when it dries, especially that wet on wet. When it dries, it kind of gives it a little bit more of a matte finish, and then the hearts like really kind of pop out. It also tastes better when it's dry. Some people like to eat the cookies, you know, like right after the class, but it tastes a little bit better when it's dry. That's probably just a preference, but I like it like that. So we're going to move this one over and let him dry in a safe spot. Okay, moving on to the O. So this time we're gonna grab the second darkest color, the third lightest, or if you want to do something else, that's fine. And then same thing, we haven't cut this one yet, so we're gonna need to grab the thick one that has a line on it, cut that tiny hole, outline the O, and not just the outside, but also the inside here. So we're kind of doing a double here, double outline, because if we only did the outside, of course it would fall inside. So we need to do two. Then we're going to flood it with that same color, and then do the polka dots or the hearts, or bypass it if you don't want to, and do that. So we have those here. It gets messy, but that's okay. All right, so we grab the thick one for the outline, cut that tiny hole. Use your worksheet if you need to have a scale for how to cut it. And then before you use it, just run your fingers through, make sure you can look at it and see a nice little hole that is about the width of a number 2 pencil lead. And then once you've got that, we're ready to rock and roll. We're going to do the outside and the inside here. Take your time. Start wherever you want to start here. And I always say, just be mindful of how you're holding it, how you're squeezing it. Getting a good squeeze from the top, making sure that all that icing is below your thumb. And we don't want to forget that inner part here. And mine kind of dips down at one point, so I'm going to do an extra layer of outline right on top. And let it dry for a little bit. I hope y'all are having fun and not frustrated at all. We're already about an hour in, which is crazy. Probably will take us not too much longer. I just realized I need to do the peace sign next, because I want to let that dry, because we're going to have to do some details on it. So instead of doing the V next, we're going to do the, after we do the O, of course we're going to finish the O, then we'll do the peace sign, and then we'll do the V and the E, and then the love sign. And then we'll be done. Okay, so same thing like you did on the L. Flood first, then toothpick next. And then about 4 hearts. We squeeze a little bit more at the top, and then we drag it down to kind of meet, and we use our toothpick to manipulate it if we need to. What color? Darker. The hearts are a little nerve-wracking for me as a perfectionist. And while it's wet, once we use our toothpick to maybe make those hearts look a little bit more perfect, then we're gonna put our little black hands here. I think I did 2 on this one, like here on the bottom right, but you can also just do 1 if you don't have enough. I did a little peace sign on the bottom, and it is gonna be kind of coming up off that cookie a little bit. And if you run out of the transfers, don't worry, we can make some more with our thicker icing once it dries a little bit. I'll show you how to do that. Perfect. And then we will let it dry. Donna, I'm glad that you're having fun and that they smell amazing. That's always good to hear. All right. So like I said, we're going to do the peace sign next. So the peace sign, I don't have a finished product and I don't know why. I think I accidentally threw my example away. But this one, what I want you to do for the color is whichever icing bag, actually, let me think. So we have the V is going to be the second lightest, and then the E is going to be the lightest. I'm trying to think which one has the most icing. Okay, so the dark brown or the second to dark brown, whichever one has the most icing. So of the thin bags, whichever one here has the most icing, that's the one we're going to use. So like if your darker brown has more in it, then use that one for this, which means that you also use your darker brown for the outline. Or if your your second darkest one has more, then use that one. So darkest one or second darkest one, whichever one has the most icing in it is what we're going to use. So I'm going to do the darker one. So for this one, we're going to use our thick dark brown. So just make sure it's got that Sharpie line in it. Oh, I just realized why this doesn't have a Sharpie line is because I transferred this one to a new bag. Oh my gosh. It did have a line on it, but since I got a new bag, it doesn't. That's funny. Just realized that. Okay, so your thick one, and we're going to do the whole outline. It doesn't matter where you start or which direction you go in. Usually I go like counterclockwise, but this time I'm going clockwise. And we're going to just outline this whole thing. And the reason why we're doing this one now is because we need to let it dry so that we can go back over and create the lines for the fingers. But we have to have a little bit of time for it to dry, which is why I said, oh, let's do that now. I'm making a mess. Alright, no hearts on this one, nothing fancy here, just flooding it. And you should have enough. We want to get close to the outline, but not touching it for beginners. But then when we spiral in, we don't want any gaps between these spirals here. Only a gap between the outline. And a little bit of icing goes a long way, so even if you feel like you might not have enough, you probably will. So a little bit goes a long way. But once it all gets in here, then we just let it dry. All right. So we will very carefully move this over somewhere. I just realized I might actually want to do the love sign next rather than last, because that one also requires a little bit of drying time. So let's move this over. It's not done, so kind of keep it close by. And then let's do our love. It's got some like edible glitter on it because I think it was on a tray that I used with some of the glitter. Okay, so for the love sign, let's use, if you have enough, so you know how I said the darkest one and then the second to darkest, whichever one you didn't choose, we can use for that here, because we're done with the darkest color, so we don't need any more of that, and then we will be done with our second to darkest color. So if you have enough in that bag, and you really only need about like that much icing, whoop, I just spilled out that much icing. If you have at least that much in your second darkest bag, then we'll have enough for this. But if there's another color you want to use, you can also feel free to do that as well. But since we already used the second darkest for the what was it, the O, we can use it for the love sign. So that means we're going to want to grab our corresponding thick one, and this one's going to be a little bit different. So instead of doing like the whole one, what we're going to do is we want to actually create two long ovals for these fingers here, which would be the ring and the middle finger. We want it to kind of look like, like that. So we're going to do those two, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to outline first. You have these little bumps here that kind of tell you where they're at. So I like to start there, and then once I get to that second bump, I'm going to come down, and I'm going to go back up. So I'm creating this oval here that looks like a finger. And again, if you mess up or if you don't like it, this would be the time to wipe it away with your toothpick and try it again. But we'll do the same thing on the other side, and then if you look at like an actual hand, they're about the same. I mean, the ring finger is maybe like a little bit longer, but you can basically just do the same length here. You'll just want to make sure that those two lines are connecting here. Do an oval and then just connect it back. So make sure that this one is connected to the other finger. Starting to look more like a love sign, right? And then after you do those two fingers here, then you're gonna just follow the rest of the outline of your cookie. And make sure they connect. And I'll give you a little bit of time to do that in case I'm ahead. So before you flood it, there are a couple of things that you need to know. So because we now have 3 segments, if you flood all 3 of them at the same time, they'll kind of mesh together. So what we need to do is we're gonna flood the biggest section, which is you know, this main part here, and then we're gonna let it dry. And once it dries for a few minutes, probably what we'll do is we'll go on to the V, and then when we're done with the V, we'll come back to this one, and then that'll be enough time to let it dry, and then we'll do one of the fingers, just one, and then we let that dry. We'll do the E, we'll come back and do the other finger. And so because you wait, you put in some and you wait, what happens is it gets this very defined look, like the segments stay separated rather than running into each other. And then you don't have to go back over and outline it to create that definition. They're going to stay as separate blocks, and it looks so cool when it dries. This is like one of my favorite techniques, is just letting each segment dry if it's right next to each other, and then you don't have to have that extra work of going back and re-outlining it. So what we'll do is first we'll do that bigger part. We're going to flood that, and then we're going to leave these 2 fingers naked. So when you're ready, go ahead and flood like we've been doing. Hopefully you're getting a little bit more comfortable as we go. And learning how to, you know, how much icing to put in so it doesn't overflood, but that you're not sitting there forever with the toothpick. You don't want to be here forever trying to spread the icing. So I feel like that's just one of the most important parts, is just learning how much icing to put inside. And this toothpick helps to get into some of those kind of like harder spots, little corners and stuff. But then we'll let it dry. He can chill out with the little peace sign. All right. So we want it to dry. And then the next one we're gonna do is the V. And the V I chose to do with the second lightest color, which is the only one that we have not cut a hole in the thick bag. So we'll want to do that. And then we'll want to get our thin of the same color ready. And then we'll have our thin icings ready to go for those hearts if you choose to do that. If you've run out with any of the colors, you can also use the thick ones for the hearts. That's going to be totally fine as well if you happen to run out. But we'll want to cut a hole in that bag, the only one we have not cut a hole in yet. And just make sure it's the thick one. And then you're cutting that tiny hole. Think number 2 pencil lead. Refocus camera. Okay, so holding it the right way, making sure after we cut it, we're gonna run our fingers through it. And then same thing we've been doing, just following the edge here. And you don't have to do what I'm doing. I'm kind of just doing it in one motion minus that mistake there. But you can, you know, do each line kind of separate if you need to. Take some practice, of course. Not, you know, a whole lot of like talent necessarily goes into this, just a lot of practice. Getting used to it. It's not any special skill that you need, in my opinion. Some might disagree, but. And then just give it a little bit of time to dry. We'll flood it, do the hearts, add a sign, the love sign, or any that didn't break, or whatever, it really doesn't matter. Down there at the bottom, I might do a fist for this one. I think so. Okay. Gonna go ahead and I think that it's dried a little bit enough here. All right. Hope y'all are still having fun. We're reaching the home stretch here. Again, thank you so much for joining me. This is super fun for me as well. I love teaching classes. You know, I do this about 60 hours a week, but classes are a little bit special. I do 1 or 2 a month. But I like doing it. It's definitely, I like teaching. I went to school for personal training, so the whole kind of teaching and training aspect is right up my alley. I taught fitness classes for a few years before realizing that I wanted to do this full time. So then I quit that job as much as I loved it. but I was diagnosed with chronic mono. So I currently have chronic fatigue, and this job was just perfect to be able to make my own schedule, work when I wanted to, and yeah, just be my own boss, which has been awesome. But the teaching aspect, I definitely miss teaching fitness classes and training clients, but this kind of gives me that opportunity, which I love. Okay. Yes. So sometimes I work more than 60 hours a week. During the holidays, you know, the only downside to this job is that you can't really pre-make anything because everything has to be really fresh. So, you know, it's not like if I had, I don't know, like if I made cards and I sold cards at like during the holidays, it could make a bunch throughout the year, but this is like I have like a week, you know, that I have to make them and ship them or whatever. So I can't, so like during the holidays, I'm not even kidding. Sometimes I'll work 100 hours that week and it's absolutely insane. And then like I'll end up basically sleeping the whole week after because it's just a lot of work. But on average, I work about 60, I would say. 40 is like never happens. That's like my break time, and it just basically is based on when people order things or like based on the holidays, and there's quite a few holidays. There's like one every month, so it's like I'll have 1 week every month that's like super crazy, but then like Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas is insane. And then after Christmas, I will take off like the whole month of January because I'm just so burnt out because Christmas is insane. But I like it, and I just like working, and so I'm fine with it. But some people are like, I wouldn't be able to do that. But for now, I mean, I don't have any kids, so as long as I'm taking my medication for my mono, like I'm good, and I can, you know, work a lot. But all right. Okay, so I'm hopefully not jumping the gun, going too fast, but our V is done. And we can let this one dry. And we only have our E left, and then we'll finish our other ones. Actually, let me see how this love sign is. I can do. Yeah, let's do our one finger on our love sign here. Flat, just one, and then leave the other one naked for the end. So do the one side, we'll do the E, we'll come back, we'll do that, and then we'll do a peace sign, and then we'll be done. So the love was our second darkest. And just make sure you're grabbing the thin one, not the thick one. And smaller surface area so you don't need as much icing. And when you use that toothpick, we just want to go right up to the edge here. It's okay if it like overlaps into the other side. It's dry enough that we can kind of, like, we can get away with that. We don't have to make sure it's like totally separated, but it's dry enough as you can kind of see. And then this one will dry before we do that side. Donna, you said work balance is much harder. Yes. It wasn't, so I've been doing this for full-time for 2.5 years, and it wasn't until this year that I finally got the balance. And I will say that COVID kind of helped with that because it cut out all my social events. So while I'm still calling friends and FaceTiming friends, you know, I can watch church while I'm working online, and then like I don't have to go places, and so I actually am resting a lot more now than ever before. So it's like that's one good thing with the quarantine, is it's been really helpful for me personally. I know that that's not true for everybody. But then you ask, how has what is going on impacted your shop? So in the beginning, when COVID kind of hit, like I was fine, and I was like, oh, I'm good, everything's good. And then, you know, people started canceling all of their events and their parties like in March and then April and May. And so all my custom orders had to cancel and refund. But what ended up happening was I started selling DIY kits, and those kind of gave me the income that I needed. So people, like, they're just like little kits, not a class, but all of this kind of like all these supplies, and then they do it themselves. So that kind of helped. But then I will say, once I started making a statement on my business about Black Lives Matter and what I believe and wanting change, the majority of my followers are in Louisiana, since we just moved from there. And so there are a lot of, you know, just Southern older white women, and I love them to death, but I think people, they kind of didn't like that I was making a statement because some people thought it was unprofessional or whatever. I disagree, but that was my heart and my business. I'm the sole operator and owner of my business, and I wanted me to really shine through. And so I think when that happened, I lost a lot of followers, and then a lot of my regulars, they just went silent. And I feel like I can share this because it's just the two of you. And whoever else, the other people who are taking the class, they're not from Louisiana. But it was hard because it was like all of my faithful followers were just kind of like, I'm not going to buy from her anymore. And not like they didn't unfollow me, but they just kind of went silent. And so that was really hard. I had a lot of people that just didn't buy anything, and so I had about a month where income like just drastically went down, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're not gonna make it. But I will say that recently, since people are doing events again, I've been fine. I've been doing a lot of custom orders, which in a sense is good for me, but not so good because that means that people are meeting together again. So I'm just kind of praying for their safety and health, but you know, I mean, it's good for me. So we're doing fine. I got a small business loan from the government, and that's kind of helped us out. So my husband is injured, and he is not able to work. He's in school right now. He was injured, so he can't work for the last year. So it's been hard because this is our only source of income. But I know this is like a lot, but long story short, we're doing all right. Everything is fine. I haven't changed who I am. If anything, I've kind of doubled down and spoken up even more, even after receiving nasty emails from people. I'm like, this is so stupid, you know, but I think it's been good, and God has taken care of us, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So okay, our E is going to be light, the lightest color. Oh, let me read all your comments. All right. Yeah, I've done this for companies. We've done virtual classes. I've done in person. Of course, I can't do that now, but we've definitely done things like that where I've done like team building, and I have experience with that. And yes, UF, my husband loves UF. I love Gainesville. So glad to be in Florida. Yeah, I hear you, Donna. I'm so sorry about that too. It's hard, but you know, it's what's right. And sometimes standing up and speaking out can be hard, but in the end, I know we're gonna get through this. And I think that the fact that I'm able to stay afloat, I know a lot of small businesses are not doing well right now. But if I can just stay afloat, I feel like later I'm gonna be better for it, and then next year it's gonna be great, and I'm gonna stick in there, and it's gonna be all good. I'm a very positive person, so I feel like I've not been too fazed by this all. But okay, so our lightest color with the Sharpie line, we're gonna outline this. And, you know, while we're just talking about this and working on this cookie, I think for me, I mean, I think my experiences have really helped kind of shape who I am, and just wanting to be myself, you know, through my business, and not really care about how others perceive it, but just be myself. Like, this is my business and I take ownership of it. But I dated 2 Black guys who I almost married, obviously at different times in my life. And then like all of my best friends, like the majority of them are Black. So I think just kind of having those experiences really helped me kind of in taking a stand now, because I talk to them on a regular basis, and hearing how they're hurting and their stories, it makes it more real, and makes you kind of like remember why you're doing what you're doing or saying what you're saying. So just trying to help people. I think we're lucky to have, just my husband and I both, just to be able to have good friends who are honest with us, and we're constantly talking. And yeah, I don't think everybody has that. I don't usually talk this much about my personal life, so it's a little weird for me, but I'm enjoying it, and thank you for asking. I really do appreciate that a lot. All right. Okay, so flood this, add the hearts, add the hands, and then we'll finish out. Thanks for all your comments, y'all. Cool, it's been good talking to y'all. Oops, I used the thick one. Gotta make sure I'm using the thin one for the hearts here. Yeah, I think there was a week, you know, where I kind of was like, okay, kind of counting the cost, like what I want to say. I know what I want to say on a personal level, but how do I go about it on a business level? Because of course it's a little bit different. And when I just sort of decided, nope, I'm not gonna stay silent, once I made the decision, I felt so good. And then it was like, anybody that wanted to tell me something, I was like, I don't care. But I'm glad I took the time to kind of like think about it and really count the costs. And because then it was like, once I started getting some nasty emails, I kind of was like, well, this ain't your business. You're not owning and operating a business. And so it's, you know, people just don't understand as much. Okay, I'm gonna add, let's see, I'm gonna do 2 on this one, probably. Right here. Oh, my hand was shaking like crazy. Oh well. Do another one. Sometimes it's hard to put these little ones in, like little sprinkles and stuff, because your hands are shaking. I just put the rest of mine. So I'll also show you if you need to go back over it, if you don't have enough of these little guys. If you want to do it when it's dry, I can show you how to do that. All right, after the E, let's do the other finger on the love sign, and then after we do that, that one will be done. And then we just have the peace sign. I'll show you how to do the extra little hands and stuff, and then you can do that or not do that. If you've got enough of those little guys, then you won't need to do that. But then I'll just close out with a few statements, and that'll be it. And of course, you know, if you have any questions or anything at the end too, I can answer. All right, so I'm gonna flood this other little finger here. To be honest, I think it's kind of sad, but this is kind of a testament to sort of what's going on. I do have a much more diverse following than it sounds. I mean, not all, you know, I want to say that, like, I love my customers, I love the diversity, but only 3 people signed up for this class, and I usually have 20 people, so that was strange, you know, and feeling like, did I do something wrong? Like, I did it the same way. I've probably taught up to this point, I've probably taught 50 classes, I want to say, and I usually sell out or have like a lot more people. So that was kind of sad, being like, why don't they want to sign up for the class? So it's really hard. Like, is it COVID? Is it people lost their jobs? Like, I think that this time is just, it's hard for everybody, you know, and I'm trying to just like be compassionate and as loving as I possibly can to help out people who are hurting. It's hard to like seeing small businesses have to shut down and stuff because people just aren't buying stuff. Really sad. Okay, let me know if I'm going too fast. I'm about to do the peace sign. These look great. I hope y'all's look great too. They look so cute. Love it. All right, so if we're ready, we can do the peace. The love is done. Everything else is done, just letting it dry. What we're going to need for this piece, and this one is going to be a little tricky. This is probably going to be the most advanced. Of course, it isn't advanced, but it is a little bit hard. So I'll show you what we'll do here, and then we'll just need our dark brown that has the Sharpie line on it. Yeah, I can wait a minute. I'll wait a minute. Let y'all catch up. I'll give you about a minute or so. I'll show you while you're catching up. I'll just show you, like, if you want to do little, let's see, I'll take my old one here. Let me see. Let's do I'll do the E. This is just my display one. But if you don't have enough of those little hands, Donna, you can basically, with your thick, and it can be any color, you would just basically like look at, you know, like if I want to do the peace sign, I would look at here, the one that I have, like this one, I'm looking at the shape of it, and then just trying to kind of like replicate it. And then you can use that thick one, you can actually just flood with that same one. You don't have to get the thin one. So you can kind of like do it on top when it's dry, like that. If you need to, you can also do like a fist. So just kind of, the fist is probably the hardest one, but if you have one that already has its shape still, you can try to kind of like replicate that. Usually I just kind of go up and then like, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't look as good, but you can kind of tell it is supposed to be a fist. The little bumps for the knuckles. So there's always that option if you don't have enough of these guys to stick on. Okay, so last one here, and we'll finish up here. Okay, so hoping you can see this. There's a little bit of a glare. Let's see. Oops, sorry. Okay, so we have to create the fingers with our thick one. So I'm gonna do it step by step. I'll do a section or a line, and then I'll wait and have you do it as well. But the first one we want to do is over here on the left. We're gonna create our oval, and so watch me here. I start at the knuckle. I'm gonna go counterclockwise. I'm gonna come down, not all the way to the bottom, but then I'm gonna come back up and try to meet that line. And this one you can't wipe off if you mess up, sorry. So just try to do that one little line there, or that one oval. And if it's not perfect, don't worry, be fine. Aww. Dream Day Cakes is closed indefinitely. I haven't heard of that. We've been here for almost a year, and it feels like we've only been here for 2 months. It's crazy. Thanks, Donna. Yeah, I just heard of another bakery in New Orleans that closed. And it's crazy because on Instagram they have like 20,000 followers. So like, I don't know, like it's like that to me is not really a small business, and even they had to shut down, which was really sad. All right, our next line is going to be this other finger. Once you get to that little divot, you're gonna stop, and then we're gonna come down and meet the other. So it's kind of mirroring. It might be a little bit smaller. That'll be our next segment there. Okay, we're gonna do the thumb next. So if you want to watch me first, the bottom line is not gonna come all the way to the end. There's gonna be about 1 centimeter here. It is gonna be about 1 inch wide. So we start 1 centimeter from the edge. We're gonna go across, and then until we kind of meet this, we're gonna be touching that one and then come over. So I'm gonna show you that first. So come across and then touch, go up, and that's your thumb. And then once you get there, then you're gonna just follow the outline of the bottom of the cookie, which is easy because you already have the lines there of where to go. So really just that thumb, leave a little space, come across, up, and then across and finish the bottom part. And then The last part is the top fingers, so we'll do, the top part's not hard. The only thing is that we have to add a line in the middle. So what I'll do is I start over here on the left. I'm going to complete here, and then when I get to that little divot, I'm going to come all the way down and meet that thumb. And then of course I'll just finish the rest of the outline there. And then hopefully you have yourself something that looks like a peace sign. And with that, I will pull them all. See if I can get them all within the frame here, so we can see what we've done. And we completed, what, 8 cookies here. Love sign, peace, heart, which I'm definitely going to eat one of these hearts tonight because the chocolate is my absolute favorite. It is unbelievably delicious. It's so good. Dark chocolate. So you feel very accomplished. And this is what we've got. Awesome. Well, I hope that you enjoyed yourself and had fun and learned some things. Just a few closing statements. Your cookies, if you don't eat them tonight, which you probably won't eat them all, but you'll want to let them dry overnight. And then you can leave them unbagged for about 3 days. They'll stay good at room temperature. But if you're gonna enjoy them longer than that, just put them in a Ziploc bag. Make sure you have as much air out of that bag as you possibly can, or a Tupperware, a bag and a Tupperware. And then they'll stay good for 3 weeks at room temperature if they're in a bag. But then you can also freeze them for like up to 6 months if you want to wait that long. But at room temperature, unbagged for 3 more days, and then overnight, let them dry before you bag them. And then tomorrow, they'll look very pretty. They'll be dry, and if you want to take pictures of your cookies and send them to me, I would love to see your creations. That's always really fun. Or you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook and tag me in a picture there if you want to do that. And come back and see me for another virtual class if you would like. I've got a hamburger one next weekend, and then I don't know if I'm going to do any for August, but September I'll have a pumpkin spice one. October I'm going to do Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. So hopefully I'll see y'all again and we'll decorate cookies together, and there probably will be more people at that time, hopefully. But thank you guys so much, and I hope that you have a great rest of your night, and happy birthday. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to email me if you've got any questions regarding cookies, icing, decorating, anything related to that. I will be happy to help you. But thank you guys so much, and I think I read all of the comments. Great. Enjoy your cookies. They're super tasty. I work really hard at my icing so that it's not as rock hard as most royal iced cookies. So it'll be soft. Just the sooner you eat it, the better, the fresher and the softer. So thanks so much. and have a good night. Thanks.